Good evening, I'm Corey Anderson. This is my lab reflection for Lab 8. Um, like any other lab, made sure that safety is paramount. Made sure my working area was completely clean. Had everything wiped down, made sure there was nothing else in the way, nothing that can be knocked over, nothing to be moved in the way that could interfere with anything. I also made sure to have a dust broom and pan and uh, paper towels and everything else, just in case any of the solutions or whatsoever did happen to spill or fall on the floor. I was able to quickly get them and clean them up. I also made sure that my wife and son were not in the vicinity while I was performing it, and I also made sure my dogs were out of the way, so once again, did not have a distraction. Um, Now, I know dealing with some of the stuff that we were wasn't too big of a deal, except for with the borax solution. But once again, I made sure that everything was clean, had everything labeled properly. I had everything um, staged properly, so nothing could get in the way. Had everything laid out, so everything worked out properly for that part. So once again, safety was paramount. So, and had one small issue, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, for the results, I was actually kind of confused because for the first part when we were making the slime, uh, mine actually turned more into a jelly, like like a solid jelly, like you can play with your hands. So, I was trying to figure out why exactly that happened, and I tried mixing it together with the ingredients that it said to, which was just the soda water and the borax solution and everything else. But for some reason, it like solidified, and don't know if I had too much guar gum in there, but it said to empty the whole packet. It didn't say to weigh anything out, so maybe I had too much guar gum and just didn't work it out. But by the time I got to the part, it was like a solid jelly. So I don't know if all my lab results actually ended up doing what they were supposed to. Um, but for the most part, I did go through everything, tested everything the way it was supposed to. So I may or may not have done the lab incorrectly, but I proceeded as so forth and tried doing everything and seeing if everything actually worked out the way. Now, for the soluble and insoluble inks, again, I I did believe that the substance that I came up with was going to actually pick up some of the ink off of the newspaper, but it didn't. It didn't pull up any of the inks, actually. Nothing at all. Not the highlighter, not the pen, not anything. So I think I may have messed up there on the slime, or I may not have. But I just thought because it would have like dissolved at least some of the inks, but it didn't do anything. So I moved on and went into the silly putty, um, which I also thought was going to pull up some stuff because I know I've done that before, like with the newspaper, and it's happened. But once again, did not happen. Um, the only one that I know should have came up was definitely the highlighter, because normally the pens and the permanent marker and the dry erase are more of a permanent solution. But again, none of those came up, so I was definitely confused. Um, Now, when it came to the other part of putting the dots on the filter paper and having it move, I did have results with that. The highlighter is the one that moved the furthest for sure. The pen moved a little bit because I measured it out because it said to have it about 2 centimeters away from the hole. So I measured out and then made sure. So it was slightly more than over 2 centimeters, but not much at all. But the highlighter traveled pretty much the whole way to the edge of the filter paper. So that part, I did get the results that I was expecting, to have at least one of the inks move. But for everything else, I couldn't pick anything up. I don't know why, but I was out of the guar gum, so I couldn't pull that back up and around, and I wasn't getting the results from the silly putty. But again, trial and error. So now, after all that, to the second part, when we moved on to making up the solutions, it was an eventful process due to the fact that when I was getting the test tubes ready and making sure when I was putting the thermometer in and everything else, I actually dropped the first test tube. So luckily it was just water, and it did break on the floor. I made sure to clean up the whole area, alerted my wife and child, making sure that there wasn't anything there. Clean up all the glass, check the whole area, made sure there was no glass shards. I'm just glad that it was just the water and not any other solution, so I didn't have to worry about anything else. But that made me extra cautious to the rest of the lab. So when I was putting the the clay and the thermometer on top of the beaker, or not the beakers, the test tubes, I made sure that they were in there tight and everything else, and I wasn't just holding it over the surface and having it bounce off like I did with the first test tube. So learn from my mistakes. This is what happened with that one. But when I came down to it, I got all the weights out. The water temperature, of course, started just the plain old water, ended up freezing at 0 degrees Celsius. The glycerol solution, I had a feeling that it was supposed to be a little bit higher, and it ended up freezing right around 4 to 5 degrees Celsius is what I approximated. And when I had it up on there, the NaCl solution, or the salt basically, was -6 degrees Celsius. And then for the calcium chloride solution, came up with a -8 degrees Celsius. So all of them did take a while to get down to that degree, but in the end I did still get the results that we were supposed to with that. And now I did calculate out the molar masses that we were supposed to with the solutions. For the glycerol solution, I ended up coming up with 0.873 moles per kilogram. And then I also, for the sodium chloride, came up with 1.376 moles per kilogram. And then for the calcium chloride was 0.724 moles per kilogram with water. So overall, everything worked out well. Now when it comes to water freezing and why it expands instead of contracts like most other things, is due to the types of bonds that are actually with water, which is with 2 hydrogen and oxygen. So the way that balances out is with the way the hydrogen bonds are, because the hydrogen is slightly positive and the oxygen is slightly negative. But now when it comes down, and whenever they make the hydrogen bonds, like most chemicals, they compact and try and come out with the best stability. And just so in the case with water, when the hydrogen makes its bond and it comes to its freezing point, it just so happens to be that the most stable, it actually creates holes or gaps in between each of the molecules. So it actually expands rather than retracting. So that is why water expands when it freezes, is just because the way of the bonding and the type of pattern that it leaves when it actually freezes. Now, when it comes to this actual lab, everything was clarified that safety is paramount, and making sure that you're doing everything properly, taking your time, because with that broken test tube, it could have been anything. Like if I would have been working with some type of acid or any other unstable solution or anything else, it could have been made the situation a lot worse. In my case, luckily it was just water, but safety is definitely paramount when it comes to doing labs and everything else for this. And the whole clarifying what's supposed to happen with this, like I said, the first initial thing with the slime and with the ink, I thought it was supposed to pick up stuff, but like I said, I might not have had the right solution mixed out, so it was a slime instead of a jelly. Maybe it would have actually did what I expected it to. So thank you very much, and I look forward to the next semester.